Thank you folks for joining us. Hi, I'm Kim and
I'm Gabe.
we're here just to go live for this little conversation. Our forthcoming book that we co-authored with our teacher, Diane Musho Hamilton, will be released on May 19th. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to start sharing with people in our networks, people, friends in our circle, things that we're excited that this book can offer at this time, given where we're at. And today we're going to be focusing in on resilience and working with the physiology of our systems, working with our bodies, so that we can learn to really cultivate more compassion and staying power and a sense of safety. So is there anything you want to chime in with, Gabe, at this point?
That sounds great. Now let's kick in.
Okay, cool. Well, so I'm going to start by just sharing a little bit from our chapter, Miraculously Resilient. Because we really believe that part of our ability to engage in difficult conversations means building up more of a sense of resiliency. And, you know, I'll just go into it. We'll chat in a minute.
Cool.
All right. Resilience, as defined by the American Psychological Association, is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of risk. Severe trauma can include suffering, serious physical and psychological harms, like the loss of a loved one, homelessness, war, or other damaging consequences of economic, natural, and political turmoil. Building resilience means fortifying one's ability to endure those traumas, integrating them into one's psyche, and releasing the body and mind from the grip of the experience. Building resilience and adaptability is a natural capacity of all forms of life, but people are not equally resilient. Resilient people are those who bounce back, who grow, adapt, and improve their ability to handle injury and threats to their well-being and survival. Resilient societies are ones that can evolve to creatively deal with threats to their stability and balance. For example, the term resilience is frequently used to denote a country or region's ability to cope with climate change and increasingly volatile natural disasters.
Sweet. Thank you, Kim.
Sure.
I can feel the butterflies in my stomach just reading for the first time on live. That's exciting. Yeah, so let's just pick up from there maybe and simply say that in the context of, and we can just boil it down to just having conversations, particularly the ones that matter most to us. Oftentimes our attention goes straight to the content of the conversation and our own positions and what we want to communicate and get across. But as I've come to learn, and you as well, Kim, there's the body and the anxieties, the emotions, the feelings, the sensations that we carry with us. And I'm often fond of saying it's like not the conversation, the content necessarily that's difficult, but it's literally dealing with the sensations, the feelings, the emotions that come over us. And that's what makes having the difficult conversations or the conversations that demand or merit our compassion, that's what makes it hard. And so, as you said, that we wanted to spend some time today sharing a little bit about the physiology. And by no means are we experts, so we'll be dropping in resource links, but there are some basic frames that could be helpful. So I'll just present those and then we'll just riff, Kim. Cool.
Sounds good.
So at the end of the day, we all have mirror neurons, which are basically parts of our brain that help us empathize, take someone else's point of view, but literally feel with them what they're feeling, right? And from that simple starting place, there are two routes basically that we can go. We can continue empathizing. And sometimes if we do that long enough, we'll start to lose a sense of the boundary between your distress and my distress. In other words, if you're distressed, my neurons will fire and I'll start to feel my own distress through empathy. If I keep hanging there, the experience in my body will start to read as it's my own distress, and I'll start to lose sense of whose distress it is. And that's, you can call it basically when you enter empathic distress, right? So that's one road. And it's important to say when we're empathizing in that way, particularly with emotions that are more, quote, negative or hard to work with, our sympathetic nervous system, that nervous system that's responsible for running away or fighting, is online. In other words, you're more defended at that point, less resilient. If you're more defended, you're anxious, you are streaming some cortisol, the resiliency of your system is starting to fray. The other route is compassion. So the feelings of compassion, which is basically the ability to feel for someone, not with, but for someone, paired with the desire to relieve their suffering, right? And what's interesting about the neuroscience from a high level is that on the empathic side of the street, there's a distress signal in the brain. So if I'm empathizing with you, there's a distress signal in my brain. However, if I'm in a state of compassion, I'm feeling for you and there's no distress signal in my brain. And so I'm actually in a place where my defensive systems are not engaged, which means that my social awareness is not compromised yet. So I'm actually reading the situation a little bit more clearly. And from that point of view, theoretically, I have more choices of how to respond appropriately to the moment. So what we wanted to impress on folks is just the idea that we can train, literally engage in exercises that help us choose the compassionate physiological state so that we're more resilient. There's a sense of safety in the compassionate state. Our defensive systems are not engaged because they don't need to be in that way. And we're better able to respond. And so just in the same way that, neurons that fire together, wire together, whatever you work on, your brain ends up supporting, right? So the very notion that you can exercise in particular ways to activate parts of the brain. And in this context, just the reference point, like the key magical word in the research right now is the vagus nerve, which is heavily involved in the parasympathetic side of the street. So they're exercises that engage the vagus nerve that trigger your parasympathetic system, which dampens your fight and flight system. So those three kind of exercises thematically, one is about breathing. So there are ways that you can engage your breathing that actually activate that vagus parasympathetic response. There's literally the use of your vocal cords. Singing, chanting is another way of activating the vagus nerve. And there are different postures, physical embodied postures that we can play with. And so all these things we're saying are exercises that can cultivate your nervous system, that predispose you to a more compassionate state, so that when you do engage conversations, you already have that predisposition being forged in you. And again, this is like a lifetime practice, but we might as well start now.
Yeah.
Kim, you want to riff?
Yeah, perfect. What I like about that cultivating that ability to move into that space of compassion is I think about it as like a home base, so that as life circumstances, unexpected conversations, or even just internal stressors pull us off course, we actually have had an experience in the past of where it is to come back to some kind of center. And I remember when I was teaching more yoga and instructing simple meditation a few years ago, one of the things that just felt so true to me was that, and this is speaking to that part about embodied kind of practices, in yoga, we will intentionally seek out postures, asanas that are actually quite uncomfortable at times. But by learning to stay there, slow down, breathe, and calibrate our nervous systems to this experience of being in that somewhat difficult space, we can grow our capacity for that default cushion of compassion for oneself to stay in the discomfort grows. And the more that we know that that is a safe home to come back to, the more we can practice that consciously, as Gabe was saying, when we're in moments where, you know, that empathy, compassion line is a little bit more difficult to find. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, we're trying to keep this short. We're like just exploring Facebook Live. I'm feeling good about it so far. But in terms of maybe offering exercise, Kim, you know, I don't think we're going to offer an exercise in all those categories, but maybe the breathing category of how to engage the vagus nerve in that way, or the parasympathetic, to help us, as you said, cultivate that sense of home would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very simple breathwork practice that anyone can do at any time that can allow us to access that little bit more of a spaciousness feeling in our systems. My simplest way of presenting it is an inhale for 4 and an exhale for 6. And so it's just lengthening, broadening the exhale, which is a way of sort of tapping into our parasympathetic and which interacts with our vagus nerve so that we can learn to cultivate that compassionate state. Let's practice it together just for a few cycles of breath. If you're watching along with this, then, you know, thank you for being here with us. And maybe wherever you're at in your day, if you can just, you know, place your bits and pieces, your to-do list, your multiple tabs, just like put it on pause for a quick second, and let's take some breaths together and see how that feels. Okay, so grounding down into your seat, grounding down into the floor, the ground that holds you, the earth beneath that. Just taking a moment to find that stable posture from which your body is lifting up. Just a gentle arising through your spine, through the crown of your head, sense of lift. And I'll count us through our breathing together. So let's take a deep breath in and then exhale completely. Just empty out. And we're going to inhale now for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhaling 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale again. 4, 3, 2, 1. Just feeling that fullness for a second. And exhaling, release for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just allow that emptiness just for a moment before you inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just do that one more time for inhaling. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, let it go for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And some recovery breaths in your own cycle without manipulation or control. Just let the breath wash in and out. Knowing you can always come back to this place. Thank you for joining us for that. And by the way, if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm liking seeing your presence here in this little chat box that we have. But, you know, feel free to share anything that you're receiving from this or any questions. Maybe now's a good moment. Hi, Gina. So we had a question sent to us before about how do we, is that all right, Gabe? If I bring this in now, I think it can dovetail with our point on compassion. So how do we cope in conversations where the other person is expressing a level of anger or distress that's actually triggering for us? And in those moments, and acknowledging that we all have you know, those slightly tender edges or the reasons why in our upbringing we might be more sensitive to certain tones of voice or ways of presenting information or emotions. And yet often these people are people, you know, with whom we're in deep relationship and we want to be. So how do we kind of moderate that space and allow them to be themselves while also acknowledging that it can be having a perhaps a distress response in the system? And Gabe, do you want to, you shared something earlier, which I really appreciated. Do you want to speak to that, how you would address this?
I don't remember what I said, but what comes to mind now is that in a way, like every person has their own right to feel, right? And I think part of the practice that I do is to explicate as much as possible, like what's going on for me. So recently with my partner, I was like, yo, do you mind if I just consciously vent? And so that actually lets her, from this point of view, nervous system know that some intensity is going to come her way and it's got nothing to do with her. And so she can actually kick back into a more receptive space and practice exactly what you just took us through, which is like a breathing exercise. So, to the degree that we can name and explicate, we are giving our nervous system, in a way, a prime, a way of prepping itself for the intensity of whatever moment might come. So that's what comes up to me in this moment. I'm curious what comes up for you.
Yeah, just to add on to what you said, if everyone's allowed to have their own ways of expressing and processing their own emotions. And I note there that we all have different tolerances, you know, maybe depending on the homes that we grew up in or something, or is for one factor. Um, but two things just ring true to me is that there's the intention that we have and then the impact of how we're communicating on other people. And so there's an opportunity there to also invite the other person, if it's the right moment to, and it's for everyone to judge, but if it's the right moment, letting them know that the impact of what they're expressing could be landing in such a way that's not actually congruent with their intention. And that might be important information for them to have. So, and certainly for having that conversation, cultivating a level of compassion, being able to like sort of be with, or do you say before, not be with, before their frustration or before their sense of anger or hurt, and not taking it personally so much, but still letting them know that the impact could be that one is retreating, one feels the need to protect themselves. So that's something that I would hope that by building resilience within ourselves, knowing that we can withstand the discomfort of what one might respond to with that, at least it allows for that conversation to happen. Whereas if we're in a more fragile state and we're kind of scared of consequences or just scared of things going the wrong way, to so to speak, we could be shutting down our opportunities even sooner to have that conversation. So I find the practice quite encompassing in that way. I hope that helps. I'm also seeing Alessandra's got a question here. Could you please give an example of the difference between empathy and compassion when one is dealing with their own wounding? I mean, one thing that comes to my mind, just linking back to what Gabe was saying earlier, is that having empathy for one's own wounding or one's own past, maybe one way in which we could tell the difference is that by, if it is an experience of empathy, by going through that process of emotionally processing and being present with oneself, you might actually find yourself getting depleted. You might find yourself getting worn out or somehow feeling like, oh, you know, you're at the subject of this greater experience, a little bit subject to it. Whereas compassion to me has more of an expansive feeling to it. So it's like when we're sitting in meditation, when open awareness can hold many things that arise, can hold a lot of painful experience, but it's not overly identified with it. So when the moment comes to let it go, when the moment comes to write a new story about your wounding or to engage in some healing, that you then let things be changed. You let yourself be transformed and have compassion and hope and maybe an invitation for a fresh way of feeling and understanding to come through beyond that. Gabe, what's up for you when you
I
feel
think that's awesome. I think what comes to mind is, so the friend that Alessandra is drawing us to is self-compassion. So again, empathy and the empathic distress, to Kim's point, I think the more we're empathizing with ourselves, that's great. To the degree that the narratives in our mind are reinforcing the sensations in our body and the feelings, therefore, we're going to be stuck in this loop, which can kind of lead you to like over empathy, to use this frame. And again, I think we're in the field of like art and science right now. But from that point of view, to empathize with yourself is fine. To welcome the narratives is fine. But just to pay attention that those narratives will reinforce the sensations and the feelings, and you'll be reinforcing this loop. Compassion, there's an aspect of yourself that can observe and witness the very thing that might be causing you distress, that is inviting you to empathize with it. But the self-compassion, I would kind of frame it as, if you could locate yourself, and it might require you to breathe in the same way that Kim instructed us, to find a part of yourself that is actually indeed just fine as it is in this moment. And once you can resource that part of you, I think then you are in a much more different space in your own self-relation. For me, if I feel into it, that part of me that does feel safe, that feels secure, that feels sovereign in my own self, I'm just conjuring up something that gives me my own distress. Like that part of me feels older, actually. And it can kind of create a space of safety for maybe a younger part of myself to feel and express. And my only suggestion to all of us is to pay attention to our narratives. They will reinforce the feeling. So coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, chanting or singing are ways to come into this present moment and disrupt the narrative, and actually just allow yourself to feel, and the body has its own intelligence of moving through that, especially when you engage in these practices. So just a compliment, Kim.
Yeah, great. That sounds good. And actually, just on that mind-body feedback loop, I shared a post on my personal page just a few days or a week ago on transmuting emotion, which was something that we addressed in the book. So if it would be helpful to folks, do go back and look on my page and see that there's a 7-step process on transmuting emotion. And one of them is creating more awareness around this mind-body feedback loop that can give us more of a momentum in feeling states that we actually might want to learn to let go of ultimately. So yeah, maybe now is a good moment to just let people know some book announcements. Gabe, how are you feeling there?
Yeah, that sounds good. I just put in a resource to some of the science of what we're talking about. So if you're curious, check that out. Super informative. And yeah, in terms of announcements, obviously, we co-wrote a book along with Diane Mitchell-Hamilton. She's our Zen teacher and facilitation teacher as well. And the book comes out May 19th. And so we're doing this in service of getting the word out, but also more than anything to connect with you in the context of what this book fundamentally is about, which is practice. And so we just wanted to put the word out, get this in the hands of folks that are called, so we can kind of work together, particularly in this period of time. And so, Kim, do you have the link, the buy link? So Kim's going to drop in the buy link into the comments section. And this is this is through our publisher, Shambhala. And the benefit of that is that we will give you in this chat box, and we'll make sure we put it on the recording as well, the coupon code, which Kim just dropped in. So that gives you a 30% discount on the book. And yeah, just thanks for joining. Kim, is there anything that you want to say before we sign off?
Maybe just to say that, yeah, thanks for being with us as we test drive this. This is our first time living on Facebook via the Zooms. And we're curious about, continuing to offer this, in maybe the coming weeks. So this week we thought, really come back to self. Let's start here at home with ourselves. But maybe going forward, we can share more practices and more frames for engaging the other. How do we prepare for those conversations? What happens when we get there? What happens when things go off course? I think now more than ever, we have an opportunity in our times to really look at how we're doing things. How are we communicating? A lot of things have changed for many of us in the last month, given our current conditions. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for practice to refine. And I've been really interested in this concept recently of self-awareness that actually leads to a level of self-mastery. So it's kind of in that spirit that we hope to invite you into this conversation with us. Please reach out to us if you've had any thoughts or inspiration or questions, or you want to know more about the book. We'd be really happy to share. And we also have an online course that will be coming out this fall. I think if you enter your email address into compassionateconversations.com, you'll be added to an email list where you'll receive updates about that if you want to go deeper with us into this.
Sweet. And Kim, I don't think you dropped that in, so I'm just going to drop it in right now.
No, I didn't.
Okay, so here it is, gang. That's the landing page for the book. As Kim said, there will be a pop-up little square that says join the community, and you'll get announcements for future trainings and future classes that we do in person, online, etc. So with that, maybe we'll sign off and goodbye and thank you. And this was surprisingly exhilarating.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gabe. I'm glad that we did this, and see you all soon. Bye, friends. Wow.